Most shooters don't fail because they're unskilled. They fail because their habits get them killed. Today, we expose the training scars you don't even realize that you're building and how to erase them before they erase you. I'm talking to Francois Leroux, one of the senior loan operator instructors, and we talk about very specifically training scars, habits that will get you killed. Francois, hello and welcome.
Hey, thank you for having me, Rian.
Yeah, it's always good to chat to you. Welcome back to the channel. Let's start off because I'm pretty certain not everybody is aware of the term training scars. They probably think it's a visible scar somewhere in your body. So what exactly is a training scar and how does it develop without the shooter noticing?
Training score is basically, for lack of a better word, a bad habit that builds up. So that's basically training and not
Mhm.
necessarily realizing that you are now building a bad habit. And this is unfortunately because most people just train by themselves, and most of our training is done dry fire and all of that. Unfortunately, it's very easy and very quick to pick up a bad habit. And like you know, we are humans, and shortcuts are the way we tend to go.
Yep. Well, yeah, it's unfortunate, but it is true. Um, you do things right, and then one day you do it in a different way, and you think, oh, I actually prefer this, and you convince yourself that's the way to do it. Meanwhile, it's not, and you're teaching yourself something that's going to bite you in the backside somewhere down the line. So it's a bit of a fine line. And again, for me, it underscores the value of good quality training because if you have such training scores, then a good instructor will be able to recognize them and help you rectify it faster than you can do it by yourself. In fact, not even most probably. I think that's just a certainty.
Definitely.
Why are these predictable range habits, like things like stepping back, resetting your stance, one of these talking points that never goes away, that almost a theatrical glance when you scan. Um, how can these things become dangerous in a real life situation?
So to use an example that I always use for the students is the Miami-Dade incident that happened in 1980, somewhere there, with the
Mm-hmm.
FBI that had a shooting in Miami. So basically, these guys, this was still the heyday of the FBI, shoot first, ask questions later. They had basically full reign to do what they needed to do. But unfortunately, they were still on revolvers. Most of them were shooting 38 specials. And I think it was two guys, but they had a massive crime spree, and they had semi-auto rifles and all of these things. They outshot the FBI. And because they had high capacity firearms, they of course did their thing, and the FBI had to reload their 5 or 6 shot revolvers. So when after they investigated this whole story, what happened? They found brass casings, fired brass casing in the pockets of most of the FBI agents, because they were taught on the range that you shoot your 5 or 6 rounds, you empty your revolver into your hand, and you put it in your pocket. Then you don't have to pick up your brass. So these guys in a firefight put their brass back into their pockets. Now this is the ideal example of a bad habit that was building. They were probably shooting, and most of these were career FBI guys, so properly trained, not rookies, a few years behind them, proper trained. And unfortunately, this is the habit that they build on the shooting range because it's easier to do that than pick up brass from the ground. And this now suddenly becomes a thing where it becomes ingrained in all of our training, where you step less because it's less effort, or you get used to a flat range because the target's just in front and you have to be pointed downwards, and you start becoming complacent in the training scenarios you create in your head, and that leads just to a massive amount of false security and false sense of ability and readiness for a situation that you are not they're not ready for.
I want to touch on mags, mag changes when, mags are just dropped straight down. And if you're in a shooting environment on a range where there's no pressure, no nothing, you're just standing statically and shooting at a target, and the mags drop, even when you're doing a mag change as you're shooting. Um, how can that start becoming a problem if you're in a pressure situation where, now there's real pressure, there's real stress that's induced. Maybe someone is waving a gun around in your direction, shooting in your direction, and you are feeling this pressure. And suddenly those mags can become a problem because, I mean, you haven't gone through the process of teaching yourself how to step away from a situation, break, move directions, reload on the go, that sort of stuff. Um, how does things like that become a practical problem?
Yeah, so I have to admit, yeah, this is a bit of a pet peeve, not dropping empty mags on the ground. If it's empty, just drop it on the ground. I hate it when people take an empty mag out of their gun and put it into their mag pouch. It is not where empty mag goes, but we'll get on that now. So yeah, so mags is a thing, especially the way we mostly train is 2 rounds to change to practice mag changes. So and it becomes so, you become so complacent and so used to shooting 2 rounds that it actually becomes a habit where you shoot two and you drop a mag that now has only 2 rounds out of it that used to be a full mag. And that becomes a habit so quickly. And now you're dropping basically almost full mag. So that habit, the habit of standing still, dropping the mag because you're standing still, you're so used to a flat range that now mag drops. And then another thing is, if you drop a mag, you want to pick it up and put it in your pocket, even if it's empty. So yeah, that becomes a whole disaster of small little training habits that picked up. That becomes a whole collaboration of mistakes that can be made during a live firefight where you cannot afford them at
How
all.
do you fix that?
You have to properly train them. So you cannot, ammunition is expensive. So I understand that you cannot shoot full mags all the time, but you have to practice it at least every now and then and shoot to a slide lock back position where you are now mag empty. And understand what that is, because if you get used to your firearm, you get to a point where I know what my firearm does. It took a lot of time training malfunctions and mag changes that I know my firearm feels different when it locks back. So then either I was riding the slide lock or the mag is empty. And if you train it well enough, I know for a fact that I wasn't riding the slide lock, so it has to be an empty mag. And we see a lot of people that's been in this situation when we talk to them that they said, I shot 4, 5, or 6 rounds. And they're like, but your mag is empty. And it happens so fast, you don't realize how many shots you actually shoot. And it just becomes a whole recipe for disaster. So you have to train at least every now and then how a full mag feels and shoot it, slide lock back, and do a proper mag change in a tactical situation where it's not taking out your mag, putting it in your pocket, taking a new mag, putting it back in, where it's urgency all the time.
What about things like predictability when you're training? Uh, you're always doing the same thing. Draw, you shoot a shot, two shots, you holster. When you step away, you always step in one direction. Shoot, scan, holster, that sort of stuff. So predictable. There's an element of predictability that starts sliding into your training that is gonna, well, you're gonna fall back to that under serious pressure. Um, how do you fix that predictability so that it doesn't become so fixed in your training that you start doing it under pressure?
Yeah, unfortunate predictability is something that, especially in the beginning of a new shooters, it is something that you have to do just to get them used to all of the stuff. But then it needs to fall away very quickly. And you need to train it in a method where nothing is ever as you expect it to be. And yeah, there is some nice training methods out there. Ideally, you'll have someone there, a proper instructor looking at you, because that's the best way to get you a little bit on your nerves. But just the ability to have proper targets that sometimes are no-shoot targets or different distances. Putting cover in a position where you now put yourself at risk because the cover might be super low or super narrow. uh, in a different direction. Something we see very little on the range is someone that actually turns and runs away. Every now and then you see someone that you can see this guy, that's plan A, is running away. And that's something
Mm.
that should be your plan A. It's always my plan A. If I can run away, I'm better off for it anyway. So
Yeah,
just training
avoiding
it
the
and
situation. Yes.
yeah, avoiding the situation is, of course, your best bet, especially where you have to deal with all of the stuff that could come with whatever incident happens. But just getting yourself, making your training interesting. There is so many things out there, but not getting complacent to where you put a target at a certain distance, you stand at a certain spot, you see, shoot 5 rounds, you move to your cover, you shoot 5 rounds, cool, my range day is done. And every weekend you go and you shoot that. There's no point in that because unfortunately, the situation you will be in won't be predictable. That is the element that you struggle with. That is why we focus so much on mindset and your why when we train
Mhm.
students, because you have to be ready for anything, because anything could happen. If we had the ability to know what was coming, then we could train for it. But we don't. We don't know who's coming. We don't know when they're coming. We don't know if they're even coming.
Um, what's your thoughts on the following? Uh, no round count drills, failure drills, maybe even hostage targets, changing target positions frequently. Uh, if you start layering decision making, not just actual marksmanship shooting. In other words, not an over reliance on the static range. What's your thoughts on that?
So the first thing that comes to mind is that old saying that says, one mind, any weapon. So the first thing you need to train is your mind. And that is exactly what you do in that kind of situation where you have you have to approach everything different every time. And then it
Mm.
becomes a more mind game than a shooting game. Because shooting, you can become a professional in shooting in a few days and you can become very proficient. But unless you upskill and you test yourself a little bit, it's not gonna help you at the end of the day. Standing stationary shooting 5 shots is only gonna get you so far. But having a proper training scenario, instructors that actually know how to push you and know when students, because certain students you can push them very hard, and other students need a little bit softer touch. Let's put it that way,
Mhm.
because everybody's on a different stage in their lives, in a different training scenarios, different way that their mind works. So yeah, it is the way to go as frequent training as I don't want to say complicated, but as elaborate as possible that you can handle. That is the best way to grow.
I want to talk about that scan after a shoot because there are so many opinions about that. I have heard it referred to as the Hollywood scan, meaning it's just for show. Is it really just for show? What's the correct way of doing that? What is the real purpose of that? How do you train? How do you bring that into your training so that it actually serves a purpose and not just look looks cool?
So yeah, there is definitely a use to it, and if you don't do it right, we call it a tactical air flick. But doing it properly will
Okay.
will definitely save your life. So the way I always try and train it is that if I have a threat in front of me and I
Mhm.
eliminate that threat, I want to make sure that he's down. So I'm checking that he's hitting the ground. And then I'm confirming is he down? Because if I shoot someone on a bulletproof vest, or I maybe nick him, because anything can happen in stress, he can go down and he's still a threat. And we've seen this multiple times in crime where guys wear bulletproofs and people think that, yeah, in the movies, you shoot someone on a bulletproof vest out of the fight. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. So you definitely want to check that's my threat. Is he down? And then we know in this country that even in America, they're struggling with groups of 5 people now attacking someone. You need to make sure,
Mm.
did he bring anybody else? Where's his buddies at? So you need to check around you. And it helps to break that tunnel vision, just get you out of that oh shit, this just actually happened. And just look around in front of you, see what has happened. Is there something else I need to engage in front of me? This is my direct field of view. I need to make sure that there's nothing there. So always, is it down? Did he bring any friends? And then you just want to check behind you. Because that's of course, if I was gonna attack someone, best place to come from is behind, especially if they're
Mm.
ready for a fight. And then check behind them. Does there anybody else want to play? And that rhyme comes from the Warrior Poet Society. He actually canned that saying where is he down? Did he bring any friends? Does anybody else want to play? And
Yeah.
it's a look. He always says everybody scans it differently. There's a different speed for everybody. So a novice shooter will look a bit will look and see a bit slower than someone that's more experienced. But know what you're looking for. And especially in a civilian situation where the threat might not have a uniform on, you need to make sure what's going on behind you. And this also gives you so much information like who's running around, where is the other cover or concealment that I can get behind. So it's actually a multifunctional a tactic that you can use if you actually just use it correctly instead of a tactical hair flick or a Hollywood scan, as you call it.
So what you're saying is there must be purpose behind that movement. You're not just doing it. You're actually actively, well, you're trying to break tunnel vision,
Yes,
correct?
yes.
And you're trying to actually pick up other potential threats and getting to a stage where you will also do that when you are working under the most severe kind of stress-induced conditions.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to go back to administrative reload routines. How can that include dangerous muscle memory that will completely fail you in a real life or death situation?
Yeah, so a tactical mag change or tactical reload is a very important part because if you have a gun and you don't know the state of that, you don't know how many rounds you shot, especially in a stress situation, you might not know that I shoot 3 rounds or did I shoot five, did I shoot 10? I could be on my last round. So it's a good idea to, if you have, and I'm not saying it's going to happen in such a situation, but if you are lucky enough to get a few moments of breath and just say, okay, the threat has passed, but you don't know what's going on. You need to get yourself back and ready for that fight. So tactical mag change is very important in that specific situation. But there's so many bad habits that people build. One is I personally prefer to make sure that I've got a full mag before releasing the one that I've got in my pistol. Because I've got a working pistol that works. I know it can fire the next round. The slide's not locked back. But now dropping that mag and anything could happen. You can now that it could slip out of your hand, it could fall on the floor, and now you've got a basically empty gun, and you could see, and you don't have a mag left, or you didn't have bring an extra mag. You forgot to put your mag pouches on. Whatever scenario you want to think of. So always, that's my idea, is always check that you've got a mag that you can actually replace that current one with. Then you want to make sure that you're not standing in the middle of nowhere. And this you can check while you're running. You can check if you've got a mag while you're running. But you don't want to stand in the opening. You're used to a flat range, stand there for everybody to see doing a mag change. Now basically taking your pistol out of fight, even if it's for a second, then you become a clear target. And another thing is that mag, dropping it on the ground. So you want to make 100% sure that you practice your mag changes. So I've got my preferred method is to use my pinky and ring finger to actually grab. So I'll grab my mag and then I'll grab my mag out of my pistol with my pinky and my ring finger, and I've still got it there. I can load my other mag and I can make sure I'm ready to go. And then that mag goes somewhere where I can still use it because I don't know in what state it is, but that ammo could be very important very soon. I don't know what's coming next. So another thing is you don't want to drop it. That's very important. Don't drop it. And also never go back into your mag pouch. Like I said, that's a pet peeve of mine. Only thing in a mag pouch is a full mag.
Are you a proponent for shooting basically till your gun is empty and the slide locks back and doing a mag change then?
Well, if that's a situation you end up in, that is a situation you end up in.
Mm.
To say that you're going to get a chance to actually do a tactical mag change is probably slight to say the least. But yeah, so if you have to shoot till you slide lock back, then you do that. That is unfortunately what it is going to be. But would I push my luck for that? Not if I have the chance to do a tactical mag change, in my personal opinion.
Because isn't it a potential problem while we're on that subject that I think very few people do a round count while they're actually shooting.
Yeah, I've heard and spoken to a few guys that have been in situations, and I've never heard anybody that said they knew how many rounds they shot. And usually it ends up being they think they shot a few, and it ends up being a lot.
Okay. when you holster the gun, because that's something that's another thing that can cause what we are talking about here, these training scars, and you see it a lot. People just ramming that pistol back into a holster, um, which always makes my blood run cold. Because especially, depending on your carry position, but some carry positions are sort of closer to the family bits. And then you check this guy shooting and gun is back. And I'm just always thinking, I don't really know if that works for me. What are your thoughts on that, holstering guns? We know why obviously you holster because the drill is sorted, you finished, you want to reset, the instructor is talking, you've had there's a pause for whatever reason. So you are gonna holster. I mean, that's just the way it is. But you can have a problem if you holster too soon, if you're in a real shooting, and maybe there is another attacker that you didn't pick up quickly, and now you bring your gun back in the holster. So that all the threat may not be fully stopped. How do you work around this holstering situation to ensure that it doesn't become a potential training scar?
Yeah, this is another point where your scanning is so important, because if you don't holster, if you learn to not holster, to scan with your firearm in your hand, then your chances of seeing another threat before holstering and then basically taking yourself out of the fight is less. So your chances are definitely better survivability. But yeah, unfortunately, it is a thing where it becomes in, and I see it a lot on, not on our range, but there's a few when you walk past and you see the guys. I know exactly what you mean. Pistol out, bang, bang, pistol back in the holster. That thing is, it almost looks like that Hollywood Western where he pulls the 6-shooter, he shoots a few shots and he drops it back in the holster. And basically his hands off the pistol faster than the shots went off. And if your firearm is not in your hand, it means nothing. It is just as good as an empty gun. It means absolutely nothing. So holstering too fast is definitely something that you should take care of. And that's why the scan is so important, just to make sure what's going on around you. And then the other thing, like you say, people just dropping that pistol into a holster where they're not ready for it. We've all seen the videos on YouTube and things that go wrong because you are in a straight situation. You are now not necessarily 100% in control of your body. And a finger, due to panic and stress, can still be on the trigger. And because you're pressing it into that holster, because you don't holster softly, it will force that finger up and pull a shot.
Francois, what are some of the most common training scars that you've personally seen, or maybe heard some of the instructors talk about, that you guys have picked up on the range? And which ones of those concern you the most?
So one that I picked up a while back is I don't know where he picked it up. I'm assuming through dry fire, but he has a tendency, fingers off the trigger. Then when he does anything, he puts his finger on the trigger, takes his finger back off the trigger, puts it on the trigger and shoots. So when he moves, when he peeks around cover, anything like that, finger goes on the trigger, finger goes off, finger goes on, shoots. And that is, of course, one of the 4 safety rules. Keep your finger off the trigger. Because especially in a situation like that, if your finger's on the trigger and you're not consciously aware of that, if you fall or anything like that, but you're not ready to shoot, so you're not in a, I am now going to shoot, so my finger is on the trigger mindset. If you fall or trip or anything, the shot can go off so quickly and so easily. And then it becomes, or it can become a whole other mess. So that is, finger off the trigger is one of my most important. That's why it's part of the 4 fundamental safety rules.
That's actually that's a brilliant example of a training score. Where a training score, as we said, is basically a bad habit. And you train yourself into bad habits. As you carry on, it becomes worse. And having your finger on the trigger while you're doing anything other than shooting is that can be a big problem. So yeah, I think that's a great example. Quite a scary one as well. how does stress physiology, things like adrenaline, tunnel vision, shaking hands, the old favorite, interact with training scars to amplify these mistakes?
Yeah, so the thing is, when all of those things hit, it becomes a thing where you all of your bad habits just get amplified. It's that thing where that always says you don't rise to the occasion, you drop to your level of training. And exactly in that situation, if you've trained with your finger on the trigger and you stress or you get startled, your hand is naturally gonna clench. That is just naturally what we do. And then it becomes a thing where now you should pull a shot off that you didn't intend to shoot, and that could have a multiple of implications. And another thing, I'm not a big fan of safeties on a firearm, not because it doesn't work, because it is something that I personally struggle to get off. If I am in a stress situation when I'm being shouted at, that in a proper training situation, I struggle to get the safety off. That fingers become flippers, and I just can't get that thumb to do exactly what it does. And for that same reason that I know how my body reacts, I stopped training using my slide lock to drop my slide forward. I started practicing that whenever I need my slide forward, I pull my slide because it's easier to do this than this, to just pull
Mm.
my slide back and let it forward. And on slides, another thing that happens a lot with bad training is people that ride their slides. And in stress, that happens. Now you're so used to riding your slide forward that now you're basically inducing malfunction. So all of these things, and your mind is so busy with the millions of things that you now need to think of. Where am I going? Where are my targets? What am I shooting at? What's going on around me? Where's my family? Where did they come from? Where am I going? These things are just completely overloading your system, and now you've got bad habits that just throw a wrench in the works.
Yeah, I think it's rather obvious where that's probably going to end up, and it's not in a nice place. Um, let's move on from that to try and look at some fixes. What training methods can you apply to help break these bad habits, these training scars, um, and try and replace them in the process with more, I'm going to say, combat relevant behaviors?
So one of my personal ones that I use a lot, because I try and speed up, is just to slow down. Do it slowly and step by
Mhm.
step, just to see where it's going wrong. Because sometimes something's going wrong, and you usually see this on the target. I'm shooting in a wrong direction or whatever. That's off. I'm not 100% on target, and because you're rushing, you tend to miss this. So slowing down is a good way to start, especially for beginners. And even for me, in intermediate and like that, just to get you back, okay, what's going on? Then we of course have a multitude. Getting a proper instructor to have a look at you that can see it from the outside and just see what are you doing, why are you doing it, and just give you some advice. And then we've got multiple ways of inducing that pressure, but it necessarily pressure is not always a good thing, but it does bring out the little gremlins that you've got. Like Ru always says, that yellow box of stupid. When that comes out, everything falls apart. So we can get confident being slow and steady the whole time, but the moment you need to speed up a bit, or that urgency is there, you have a tendency to just fall off the bus a little bit. And that's a good thing to know, because I want to fail on the range, because I don't want to fail the day that I actually need my training.
So I've got here, if you look at why these training scars happen, bad habits, is because, well, it's human nature, it's laziness, it's a pattern seeking habit, it's easily conditioned. So I think if you recognize those things, then you need to do the opposite in your training, and bring the opposite in so that you can start breaking those bad habits. Like things like, if you are more focused on speed over tactics as such, so there's nothing wrong with shooting fast. But if you're in a situation where somebody is shooting back at you, or there's an opportunity for them to shoot back at you, then speed alone might not carry the day. Am I correct when I say that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's unfortunate, like you say, it's human habit for us to just kind of tend and lean to the easy part. But you cannot train in a way where you become where it becomes where you reward yourself for the bad behavior because it's easy. And tendency to fall into that hole is just there because that we have to not get complacent with our training. We have to try something new, work a little harder, not get too convenient and convenience over competence, basically.
Yeah, or get rid of the predictability. If there's predictability, if there's a pattern of predictability in your training, uh, and as you say, convenience over competence, I think you then there's a point where, and there's nothing per se wrong with that, but shooting becomes a sport, which is a completely different situation. Instead of shooting training to acquire a specific set of survival skills.
Yes, definitely. And it all has its place.
Mm.
Sport shooting and everything has its place. We just don't want to train ourselves with the wrong set of skills for the wrong environment. As long as we don't do that and we make sure that we train enough, then we should be maybe halfway there.
So, maybe to summarize, or I'm going to try to summarize in any case, um, to avoid training scars, things that you need to incorporate in your training. And again, it's there are few people out there who are at the sort of level required where you can train all of these things by yourself. Not many people are that skilled.
Definitely,
Um,
yeah.
so, obviously there are people who are that skilled and who can do that. But generally, I doubt very much that is the case. So it's probably the kind of thing that you're gonna rather find applied and induced in a proper training course by highly skilled and trained instructors who will ensure that these things are brought in. But timers, because it's amazing how much stress just a timer can induce all of a sudden. Uh, Verbal stress cues. I almost said hello, Shaltu. Movement and low light and noise, stress that exposes your bad habits quickly. So those are all things that can cause training scars, and those are things that you need to avoid in order for them to become training scars. Correct?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, yeah. You need to work on all of these things and with these stress cues. Otherwise, we just end up, like you say, it ends up becoming a sport instead of a skill that you need for survival.
How does decision making factor into all of this?
Yeah, so decision making is a thing that's like we said previously, it's critically important because you have to be at a mental state where you can decide and uh, understand what's going on around you because we are civilians in a civilian surroundings with people around us without necessarily knowing what a clear attacker looks like. And these things happen so fast and can come out of nowhere. And it's usually what they say, fortune favors the prepared, but these things usually happen when you're least prepared for them. So just having scenarios where hostage targets or shoot no shoot targets, confirming threat identification, just making it a bit difficult to see what am I shooting at. Um, Time pressure, of course, any screaming, low lights, bit of smoke, yeah, all of these things would help. And of course, the most fun of them all and the most stressful sometimes is force on force. That is something that is it shows you the cracks in your armor.
So you obviously, I mean, not every shoot is gonna be so realistic because there's a time and a place. Sometimes you just have to work at some of the basic skills as well. Um, how do you feed things in, like working in different environments? Because if you take just two very simple scenarios, you're working on a paved area, like say, I don't know, a parking lot, or you're working on a dirt area, a dirt surface where there are loose stones and maybe mud and all. And I mean, just that can really end up spoiling your day. How do you bring all of that into the overall training scenario? Obviously, these are not things that you're just going to do on a Saturday's train. But how do you factor in for different things like that? Inside, outside, close quarter, not close quarter.
Yeah, so you have to expose yourself little by little to all of these environments. You cannot go to let's say a indoor shooting range, stand there, concrete, nice lighting, and think, oh, this is how it's always going to be. Unfortunately, life doesn't work that way. You need to factor in all of these things. Even, am I in a car? Where's the car driving? Is how far can I see around me? All of these things take such a we take it for granted in normal life. But when a situation like that hits, concrete is ideal for running on. But if you're on gravel, where you suddenly now don't have all the traction, stopping and all of that stuff becomes an issue. And now slipping and sliding around in mud or gravel or whatever, it becomes a thing where you need to be ready for that. Nothing must throw you off your game. You must be ready for all of these situations. And it doesn't matter where you are, what happens for that situation, mentally you must be prepared because the rest all just what happens, happens. And that must be kind of your attitude towards these things, in my personal opinion, is practice all of these things and go around it. The saying always goes, don't let your first time be your first time. You don't want to be the first time that you have to walk around your house with a firearm the day that you need it most. So practice that. Walk around your house, see where the light goes. Where can you see? How does all the windows affect it? Even in your car, know the route you drive to work. What's the alternative routes? How can I get back to home? What can I back to work? What if there's a roadblock? What if there's a massive accident? All of these things, and it kind of factors into your life anyway. So might as well put some planning and some mental preparation into it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the reality for me is that most shooters battle to diagnose. Generally, you need somebody more skilled and somebody with better habits when it comes to shooting and training than yourself to recognize this and help you sort them out, which is crucial. So I think to conclude, I want to say the following: training scars, these habits, are effectively silent killers. They're habits that feel natural, but they fail catastrophically under real violence. And the whole goal of defensive training is not to look good on the range and look cool, but you need to be building behaviors that are durable under fear, can work in real chaos situations, can require minimal conscious thought, and can increase your survival odds. And I think it's safe enough to say if your training is too clean and too predictable or too comfortable for that matter, then you are potentially programming yourself for the wrong fight. Francois,
Definitely.
thank you so much. That is it from me. For the viewers, as always, please like the video. Subscribe to the channel and help us grow it. And as always, smash that bell icon so that you get notifications of all our new videos coming out. And if you are interested in any training, there is always a link to the Lone Operator programs in the description below. Check it out, and we look forward, as always, to seeing you on a range one of these days.